Okay, so let's get started. The coastal waters of northern Australia support extensive coral reef habitats, seagrass habitats, and globally significant populations of charismatic megafauna such as dugongs, 6 species of marine turtles, and coastal dolphins. Northern Australia is absolutely critical to the protection of biodiversity in the world's tropics because of its high biodiversity value and current low relative impact from human activities, as you can see here. But that's not to say that nothing's happening in the middle of Australia, so let's take a closer look at this. So what we have is about 51% of the land mass is under leasehold arrangement. The next, about 22% of the region, is what's under the Indigenous estate, and we'll look at that in more detail in a minute. About 13% is considered vacant Crown land, and about 4% falls into the National Reserve System. So the Indigenous estate is made up of reserves, freehold title, and leasehold arrangements with Aboriginal people. In addition to the Indigenous estate, native title has been determined on about 18% of Northern Australian lands, and what native title does, it gives Indigenous people rights to live on that land, to access it for traditional purposes, to visit and protect important places, and to hunt and fish and gather for food and things like that. Indigenous land use agreements can be a part of native title determination, or they can be made separately, and they're essentially a voluntary agreement between a native title group and others about the use and management of land and water. There are also in excess of about 199 native title claims on the register that have yet to be determined, and I think you know where I'm going with this. Essentially, 82% of the Northern Australian lands are under or have some form of Indigenous rights, use and interests. And by coincidence, 82% of Northern Australia's coastline is adjacent to land which has Indigenous rights, use and interests over it. And these rights, use and interests extend to sea country as well. And what we're seeing now in the last few years are native title determinations over sea. There's about 48 registered claims in sea country as well. And we also have what's called traditional use of marine resource agreements, which operate in the Great Barrier Reef Marine Park. The tenure issues are complex, but the point I'm trying to make with this is that Indigenous peoples and their institutions absolutely dominate remote Australia, those very remote areas I showed you in the previous slides. There's about 81,000 Indigenous peoples that live in these very remote areas, and they represent about 45% of the population outside of major centres. There's thousands of clans estates, 400 plus communities, and 130 plus language groups. But as we all know, it's far more complex than that, and the history goes back about 50,000 years. And Aboriginal Australians and Torres Strait Islanders represent the world's oldest living culture. Aboriginal and Torres Strait Island clans, kinship groups and communities have a complexity of rights, use and interests which extend beyond tenure and extend to things such as giving people permission to access those lands, to access resources and so on. Country is also absolutely central to Indigenous identity, and Indigenous Australians have cultural and traditional responsibilities to protect and manage their land and sea country. Indigenous peoples have recently expressed those responsibilities via the establishment of dedicated Aboriginal and Torres Strait Islander land and sea management agencies and ranger programs. And these were initially developed in several locations in the Northern Territory and Queensland in about the mid-1980s. Having begun with very little government support or recognition, in some locations these agencies have developed into well-established organisations with expertise in planning, GIS, research, monitoring, management and so on. The Australian Government provides some funding to Indigenous programs via Working on Country, which now employs about 600 Indigenous rangers across Australia to deliver various environmental outcomes. Other sources of funding come from fee-for-services arrangements with things like customs and fisheries. The state governments also support Indigenous ranger programs, and in Queensland we have about 40 rangers employed via the Wild Rivers program. Okay, so the government, since 1998, the Australian Government has also supported Indigenous communities to manage their sea country and their land as well via what's called Indigenous protected areas. IPAs have both conservation, cultural and social benefits, and they currently represent about 38% of the northern National Reserve System, which is a significant proportion, and this is going to get bigger because the Caring for Country program is going to expand by an additional 8 million hectares within the next few years. There's also a push towards really realising these benefits in the marine country by sea country IPAs as well, and they're being expanded too. So this is my favourite slide. If you compare the location of these land and sea management agencies, the ranger groups, the IPAs, with what's happening at a state level via state ranger programs and the National Reserve System, you can absolutely see, I think, that Indigenous communities are vital for the protection of marine biodiversity in coastal regions in Northern Australia. So let's just take a look at that. Because I can give you that if you like. It's very good. It's on the video. Anyway, so essentially what these ranger programs do is combine Indigenous knowledge and practices with contemporary methods of managing important areas of high biological and cultural diversity. Multiple services are provided by these ranger groups, including biodiversity protection, ongoing cultural maintenance, employment for remote communities, border protection and biosecurity. And biosecurity is a very big issue where me and Mariana do most of our work, which is Torres Strait. So it's really important that these agencies and the ranger groups get continuing consistent funding from our governments and also through NGOs and other sources as well. And now Mariana's going to talk a bit more about one of the other benefits of these ranger groups and land and sea agencies, in that there's what we call both ways education and collaboration with scientists, governments and other agencies. Thank you, Ma.
Thanks, Elena. Good example of Islander Ranger program collaborating and working together with scientists occurs in Torres Strait with the Torres Strait Ranger Group. So the Torres Strait Ranger Group helps communities to look after the land and sea areas by employing rangers in each island and building the capacity to carry on-ground work. The work of the rangers is identified together with communities and carried out in a culturally appropriate way. So Torres Strait has globally significant population of turtles and dugongs, and these populations also have significant cultural importance for Torres Strait Islanders and the broad community. So rangers, together with the communities, have developed turtle and dugong community-based management plans in 15 islands in Torres Strait. So the community involvement on the development of these plans has helped each community to shape the way that they want to manage turtle and dugongs in the region. So the plans that have been developed, they include a range of Indigenous and non-Indigenous management strategies, and they're also based in traditional knowledge, customary law, and dugong turtle biology. However, when those plans started to be developed, there was a lack of baseline data on turtle and dugongs in the regions. So rangers and researchers have started to work together to collect the necessary information to manage turtle and dugongs in Torres Strait. So for the next part of my presentation, I'll be providing a few examples of how researchers and Torres Strait rangers have been working together to collect the necessary information to effectively manage turtle and dugongs in Torres Strait. So one of the projects that I want to talk about is dugong tracking in Mobiag Island. So if you look here, you can see Mobiag Island is a tiny island in central Torres Strait, and it's also close to the area that has the highest density of dugongs in Torres Strait. So rangers from Mobiag Island wanted to know whether spatial closures are appropriate for management of dugongs in the region. However, to assess this, they needed to know some information about the movements of dugongs in the region to know whether dugongs were moving across different management jurisdictions. But up until recently, there was a limited information on dugong movement in Torres Strait. So the rangers from Mobiag approached James Cook University and asked help to develop a project to track dugongs in Torres Strait to obtain this information. So for the past few years, rangers and community members have been involved in a dugong tracking project in Mobiag Island. So the community has been involved in all aspects of this project, from development to execution to delivery of the results. Islands have provided expert advice on how to catch dugong, where to catch dugongs, and also have assisted with the catching technique, which has made our life a lot easier. Researchers, on the other hand, have provided technical advice and training on how to use the satellite tags and also on how to analyze the data. So now the results of this project have been delivered to the communities and have informed the management plans for Mobiag Island. So this project is actually continuing to next year. We have tagged 6 dugongs so far, and we have clearly seen that the dugongs in Torres Strait are moving up to Torres Strait, to PNG. Sorry. As I mentioned before, Torres Strait also has globally significant population of sea turtles. So rangers and researchers have been working together to collect biological data on sea turtles to underpin the management initiatives. So as a result of this, islanders are involved in a series of Western scientific research projects on sea turtles, where they learn practical research skills, basic turtle biology, and record keeping, which builds their capacity to be monitoring and managing the resources on their own. One of the projects that researchers have been working with indigenous communities in Torres Strait is to investigate the potential impacts of climate change on sea turtles. For this, Torres Strait rangers and researchers have been monitoring nesting grounds and collecting information on nesting grounds' morphology and thermal profile. So rangers have learned how to conduct beach profiles at different nesting grounds to explore potential impacts from sea level rise, and they also have learned how to monitor sand temperature to detect and monitor for environmental changes. So this information has provided key baseline information for nesting grounds in Torres Strait, and also insights into the past and current changes at the nesting grounds. So rangers now are able to monitor their own nesting grounds on their own and look for signs of environmental changes. So clearly, the collaboration between indigenous rangers and researchers are extremely beneficial for both parties, as both can learn about the management and also the biology of a particular resource. For researchers working on country with rangers, we have better access to country and resources, and also we're exposed to local knowledge, which is extremely beneficial, especially when you're working at remote locations. When researchers are working in country, they also improve their understanding of factors that they need to take into account when conducting community-based and participatory research. So the benefits are not only for researchers, but islander rangers, they also increase their understanding of Western scientific monitoring of turtle and dugongs as part of the ranger programs. But most importantly, the benefits are not only for the researchers and the indigenous rangers, but also to the research itself. Because as you involve indigenous communities and ranger groups into the research, it actually increases the positive attitudes of communities towards research and researchers, and builds trust and improves the acceptance of research and the results generated by research that you're conducting. So, as Elena showed before, there's a lot of on-ground work being conducted on country, and there's a lot of benefits of working with indigenous rangers. So we highly recommend that people start looking for opportunity to expand their work and to be collaborating on country to deliver results that are applied for management of resources. Thank you.